I had teachers who quit teaching because of me.
So hang on, Fred. I wish you'd told me all this before I recruited you for Sax School.
I actually got called to play in the circus, which I also got fired from.
G'day, it's Nigel here. Welcome back to the Sax School online podcast. So Fred, in Sax School, we all know you as part of the tutor team, of course. And lots of our listeners will know you as the sax guy from the Average White Band. I'm curious though, did you always think that you'd end up like playing with a band like the Average White Band?
No. The short answer to that one is definitely not. I had actually kind of given up thinking that I was going to do any kind of touring gig. I had spent a lot of time trying to get there, auditioning, and I was living in the New York area, hanging out in New York and meeting as many people as I could, and it just didn't work out. And that time, and by the time I was, I don't know, it's 1996. What is that? 28 years ago. I didn't think it was going to happen, and I'd gone back to university to get my teaching degree.
Is that right? Wow.
And,
So give us a bit of an idea of what that was like auditioning for bands and all that sort of thing. It must have been a lot of networking, right?
There's a lot of, I mean, that's it. Every gig I've ever gotten, and probably every gig that most people that I know have gotten, is all about knowing somebody. And I didn't audition for the Average White Band. I was recommended by a guy that I knew who worked at a music store. Wow. And every audition that I went on, I pretty much believe that it was, and this isn't, it might sound like sour grapes, but I don't really think it is, because I've talked to other people in the same boat. I would hear about, these horn players I know went and auditioned for Al Jarreau, and these guys were great players. And this guy went and auditioned for this gig, and and I auditioned for Joe Cocker's tour because the guitar player in the band recommended me. But I always feel like those auditions, especially in that business, are kind of foregone conclusions. Like they have somebody already, but they just want to see what's out there.
I see.
So it's kind of, you get your hopes up, but it doesn't really happen. Of course, it just also could have been they didn't like the way I played. That's always a possibility. And I allow myself that is definitely a possibility. But with the Average White Band, they asked me because I just knew a bunch of people. I knew the original sax player in the band. He was my neighbor.
Okay.
And he had recommended me to play in a horn section on the record. And also I played gigs with the drummer in the band, Pete Abbott, at the time, who was in the band. I'd done weddings and all sorts of stuff with him. And then Elliot Lewis, who was also in the band, was the keyboard player, bass player in the band, and he worked at a local music store.
Wow.
And he recommended me. So it was just, it was right place, right time. And of course, kind of being prepared when the opportunity comes. And surprisingly enough, it was.
Yeah, that's a whole really important conversation. And well, you've been working with us at Sax School for a while now. We've had so many amazing, legendary players come and do masterclasses for Sax School. And every single one of them, from Tom Scott to Lou Marini to Andy Snitzer, all these guys said exactly the same thing. I was really prepared. I took every opportunity. I met lots of people. I got a lucky break, It's all those things having to come together. So 1996, that was quite a lot of years that you were kicking around the scene, making contacts. And I mean, you played with lots of other really interesting people. So that must have been quite an interesting journey, and plus a busy time in New York. I guess there was a lot of music going on through the 80s and 90s, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a lot of work. There was a lot of work in that area. I mean, I lived outside of New York, lived about 45 minutes outside of New York. So I wasn't really on the scene, but I was adjacent, and I knew a lot of Andy Snitzer and I were on. We both played weddings together. I mean,
oh really?
We played in this. Yeah, that's how I knew Andy. I knew Andy because he was doing what we call club dates, weddings and private parties, and I met him at a wedding showcase or something like that. I had heard about him. The drummer in my band went to the University of Miami with him, and he was like, "You got to check this guy out. You got to check this guy out." and he was a bad dude back then, you know. And we had kind of subbed in different bands for each other and stuff like that. But yeah, I wouldn't say I was on the scene, but I was like adjacent to it, I would say, you know. And I also had the connection with Lou Marini because he was, you know, I studied with him for a long time, and he would take me around to, you know, to sessions. Well, I would have a lesson, and he would say, "Oh, I can't do a lesson today, but come and do this. Come and hang out at this recording session, and so just soak it in, you know. Or why don't you come down? I'm doing a Saturday Night Live rehearsal, and you can hang out. Linda Ronstadt and Phoebe Snow are doing a duet. Why don't you, you know, just hang out and watch?" Yeah, that kind of stuff. I was very, very, very lucky in that respect, and it makes me wish that I had probably practiced more.
So on that topic, because you mentioned how you were really prepared, and what was your approach to practice back in those days?
I had none, really. You know, it's funny because, you know, I remember you guys talking about how, you know, and Joel and you talking about how you used to practice 8 to 12 hours a day, and, you know, Joel being super disciplined, and that was never me. I was so lazy and directionless, you know, for most of my life, you know, for probably the first 3/4 of my life. You know, and I started when I was 10, and I was, you know, I thought I knew everything. I had teachers who quit teaching because of me.
Oh, that's a claim to fame. I love that.
Yeah, my clarinet teacher walked out on my lesson. He's like, "Yeah, I'm through with you." Boom. Because I was a smart aleck, and I thought I knew everything, and I would question everything, and I got kicked out of high school jazz ensemble for the same reason.
Really?
But here's the thing: my teacher, because I mean, I was tough. I mean, I was tough to teach, and I would question everybody. And my band director, Mr. Hines, in high school, we had a great high school jazz ensemble. We had guys who went on to Juilliard, went to symphony conductors. Great music program. And my director, I was such a pain that I was playing lead alto, I think, at that point. He kicked me out of the band, but he let me have my own group, like bring some of the other guys and have my own, because he knew that I had talent, but I was so undisciplined that he had to figure some way to keep it. I mean, like meetings with my parents. And,
so hang on, Fred. I wish you'd told me all this before I recruited you for Sax School.
Yeah, I know.
So I'm curious to know what was the thing. Were you bored playing in a band? Was it that you didn't have, you know, obviously you had, like you said, you had talent, you had skills, but they weren't in the right direction. So was it just about conforming? Was that the thing?
I'm just a smart ass. What can I say? I mean, that's really all it is. I mean, I was, you know, making jokes and questioning him and saying, no, I think it's this way. I mean, I don't know if it was bored. You know, it's not like I am like I'm not like a child prodigy or anything like that. I mean, far from it. I just feel like, you know, I have some talent, you know, but I was totally undisciplined. And there's some guys that don't even need to practice, and they, you know, and they're naturally talented, but I don't think that was it. I have something, you know, and I regret that I didn't work harder at it, but, I don't know if I'm getting off topic here.
I'm curious. Okay, look, you know, this is why this conversation I think is really great, because I love to understand how people think. Because that's how we understand them better as people, right? And you're a great player, and you're so inspiring for all of our students in Sax School as well. And so, you know, we're at now that's what people see. I want to know though what was before to help understand who you are and how you got to be who you are. So what I'm curious about though is if, you know, back in school you weren't disciplined, and then you had those years where you were kicking around the scene before you got your big break. What was the thing that changed? Because you're not like that now. When I look at you, I see you as being on track. You work on your skills all the time, and you're still practicing hard. So
This
what was the turning
late.
point?
Well, the practicing came very late in my career, and I got by on what I think if I have any gift, if you will, I don't like, people, I don't even know how to categorize it, but I am a very soulful player. That's what I will say that I can do. Am I a great technician? Absolutely not. Would I be a better technician if I had practiced more? Absolutely. Can most saxophone players that I know do way more things than I can? Absolutely. But I feel like, our style is we are products of our limitations. And, we were talking about, maybe this is off topic, but we were talking about David Sanborn. He became who he was because of his limitations, because he had polio as a child and the way he and any number of reasons. We're all products of that, but there are also other people that actually do the work and put in the time and practice to hone their skills. And I was never disciplined enough to do that until probably 10 years ago, really. Even when I was playing with Average White Band, I got by because they wanted a guy who was soulful and who knew funk music. And, I guess I was that. But before that, I spent, a year and a half playing in a blues band and, with McIntyre Murphy, and that kind of developed that end of my skill set. But as far as like sitting around playing etudes and working on my technique and all that stuff, never did. And it definitely had a negative effect on where I went in my career. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's why I didn't get some of those gigs.
That's interesting.
I was never a great sight reader, and that I also have some, ADHD. That could have been, who knows? I'm not going to blame it on that because I was lazy too. I was lazy. It still am to a degree, but I at some point, what really did it for me was, and this is not that long ago, was the pandemic really made me realize that I have all this time now, and if I don't do it now and really buckle down and start, practicing, getting a routine and sticking to it, because that was the thing, I was all over the place. I would start practicing something and realize that I needed to work on this instead and go, move on to that and never really complete anything. And I suffered because of that. Like I said, I studied with Lou Marini. I could have been his, guy that he recommended for for sessions and stuff like that. And I never got that far because I was so undisciplined. I'm sure he was frustrated. We're still friends and everything. We will, we're still, talk and whatever, but I'm sure I could have gone a lot farther if I had spent the time, honing my craft. Because there was, I got fired from gigs because of it.
Tell us about that. So tell us about that then. What was that experience like?
So I was out of college. This is probably the one that had the most impact. But I've been I got fired out of high school jazz ensemble, like I told you. But no, I was, I played in a fusion band called Night Sprite, and that was fairly well known in the area that I lived in. Dave Weckl played drums in the band because we all went to college together. It was a band with some guys that had gone into college with some other guys. It was all original, a lot of original material, and we were playing in New York. We were playing all over the place, and the way it happened was I had to sub out a couple of gigs, and because I got something else. I actually got called to play in the circus, which I also got fired from.
Did you?
And yeah, but I just got bored. And I started. But anyway, we'll get to that. So I had to sub it out, and they brought in a couple of different guys to take my place, and every one of them was a better saxophone player than I was. All of them. And they were like, hey, why do we have this guy? So they, it was a thing where they sat me down and said, we're breaking up the band. When really what they meant was they were breaking up the band and reforming it without me. So that's what happened.
Oh, Fred, it's not you, it's me. Is that what they were saying?
Yeah, right, exactly. But that caused me to, that was a wake-up call for me, because that was a great opportunity, and it was a great band. And I have to say, Dave did not vote for me being fired. And now Dave and I work together here in St. Louis. Yeah, I play in Dave's band in St. Louis. And yeah, it's great.
So that was an interesting experience, I'm sure, like that wake-up call where you realized that maybe it's time to readdress things. What other things were big turning points for you? What about when you're playing in these different band situations and you're surrounded by other musicians? Did that have a big influence on you?
Yeah, I will say that I find that it's always best to be the worst player in any situation, because you don't really learn if everybody, if you're playing with guys that are not, that are not up to your level. And, fortunately or unfortunately for me, it wasn't hard to find players that were better than me. So I got my butt kicked at jam sessions many times. And that's always a great, learning experience. You get on a gig and you get on a jam session, and guy calls a tune that you don't know, and, you make a fool of yourself or whatever. And you make a note. Oh, I better go home and learn that tune, so next time I can play it. Or, I went to a jam session once, and I'll never forget this. The drummer was calling the tunes, which is always a bad thing, because the drummers call the tunes. They don't care about how fast the tempos are or whatever, And Bobby Watson, the great Bobby Watson, who played with Art Blakey, amazing alto player, was also, he was on the gig, and I was sitting in because the drummer knew me and invited me to come and sit in. So I went and, and the drummer called some impossible tune at like some impossible tempo, and I just, I did not acquit myself very well. And afterwards, Bobby said one of the most polite things I ever had anybody ever say to me. Yeah, man, I can hear you're really working at it. I was like, yeah, thanks. So, those are educational moments. Those are the best things that can happen, and if you go in thinking, and that was part of my problem, is I really thought I was a big fish. I was a big fish in a little pond for a long time. And then you have, like, the first time that I went to the Stan Kenton music camps, the summer camps, which are great experiences. The Stan Kenton Big Band is in residence for a whole week at a university. They used to do them all over the United States. And the first time I did that, I was hot stuff in my high school band, and I went there and, ended up being like, in the number 6 band, and those kind of things are, those are the things that make you understand how much you have to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've had quite a few of those experiences.
I bet that was
quite a few.
I bet that was an amazing experience, though, as a teenager, because you're all of a sudden surrounded by people from presumably a big geographical area, right? So lots of different people, and you get the first idea of a perspective, I suppose. For me, that didn't happen until I actually got to university to study, because I come from quite a small area. So that must have been a great experience as a teenager.
It was incredible. I think those things still exist to some degree, but that was a life-changing experience for me, being involved in that. First of all, you are living, breathing music 24/7. You're staying in the college dorms with all these like-minded, everybody's there's jam sessions at night. You're hanging out with the guys in the Stan Kenton band. You're meeting, all these musicians from all over the place. You're just comparing notes, and guys are turning you on to new music that you never heard. And it was an incredible experience, regardless of what level, I ended up being at. And in a lot of ways, that was great for me too, just because it puts put things in perspective, and it made me realize how much work I had to do. If only I had done the work. After I figured out that how much I had to do.
In a way, it's a bit like when we do our Sax School weekender events, and we just did one recently in the UK here. We had 50 or 60 people come from all around the world, actually. And it was the same for them. A lot of the people we were talking to at those events, at the weekender events, they say the same thing. Oh, I can't believe it. I'm surrounded by saxophone players. We're playing music all day. We're learning, but also we're interacting with other people who think the same way as us. And I think that's a big thing. So I'm curious about something, Fred. You know, with your Average White Band playing, and I saw you just recently on your very last UK tour, that you've got the style down, everything about that is just wonderful. But did you always find yourself going down that sort of funk route in your playing? You mentioned these jazz jam sessions as well. So were you also thinking, maybe I'm a jazz player, maybe I'm a funk commercial player, or did you have a clear idea of who you were as a player?
I think, I mean, R&B, funk, soul music has always been the thing that I feel most comfortable playing, definitely. And jazz is just like a challenge for me. And that's kind of why I work on it, because, I mean, first of all, it definitely informs my R&B playing. You know, the guys that the R&B players that I like the most are guys that have some jazz vocabulary. And that's the thing you have to develop. You know, guys like Gerald Albright, I mean, he can play bebop, Tom Scott, those guys can all play. Even Sanborn, even Dave, as much as a blues player, he studied with George Coleman, you know, trying to get that part of his vocabulary. And you could hear a difference from when he started to when, you know, as he developed as a player. So, yeah, it's a challenge. I've never practiced playing R&B, never practiced playing funk. I always worked on playing jazz, but nobody's going to, you know, ask me to, when there's guys like, you know, Joel Fromm and Chris Potter and guys like that around, nobody's going to ask me to do it, but that's not why I work on it. I work on it because it's a challenge, you know, and you need that challenge.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to the gym and lifting weights, because it benefits you in your whole life, not just because you want to get big muscles. So
sure,
yeah, that's
exactly.
Really interesting. So, okay, so I'm getting a bit of a picture now of Fred. Your journey through, making me a little bit concerned, but and then getting some, getting a few experiences that gave you enlightenment, changed your perspective on things. You did a tour with Michael McDonald. I mean, that must have been an iconic part of your sort of experience of your career. Where does that fit into the story?
Well, that was Average White Band. This is when I was playing with Average White Band. And, I have to preface this with saying that forever since, he came on the scene, he's been one of my favorite singers, songwriters. I loved Michael McDonald's music. And, I'd never gotten even to see him live. He never toured where I was, or for whatever reason, I never got to see him. But I had all his records, huge fan. And Average White Band was doing a tour with Hall & Oates and Michael McDonald, 3 bands, 2004. It was called the Rock and Soul Review. And so I did that. We were ready to do that. So I was just excited for the possibility of being able to hear Michael McDonald every night in a show. We would open the show, and then Michael's set would play a set, and then Hall & Oates, and then we do a whole thing at the end with all 3 bands. So I was just excited being able to hear Michael every night. That was, I was really psyched for that. 2 weeks before the tour, Vince Denham, who was Michael's saxophone player, he had to have emergency surgery. His appendix burst or intestine burst or something. And I was really looking forward to meeting Vince because he played with Kenny Loggins on some really great records, and I really wanted to get to hang with him as well. So their tour manager put out a panic call to Hall & Oates' tour manager and Average White Band's tour manager. And fortunately, Average White Band's tour manager picked up the phone. So our tour manager called me and said, hey, do you want to, I don't know if how he just didn't understand how much I dug Michael McDonald. I was like, would you want to go on and play 3 tunes with Michael McDonald on the tour? And I almost dropped the phone. I was like, so you're saying I get to play with Michael McDonald. They're going to pay me an extra to play with him. I get to hear Michael McDonald in my in-ear monitors every night now. Well, yeah, of course. Well, I wanted to do it, so I got, went early to the beginning of the tour, rehearsed with him, got to meet him, got to meet the band, which was incredible experience. The piano player was a guy that I'd never met, a guy named Pat Coyle, who played with I knew him because he played famously with the North Texas State 1 O'Clock band. Great piano player. It was just a great experience all around. And Michael was still is one of the sweetest guys I've ever met in the music business. It was just a great opportunity. He was grateful because I was kind of saving the show by being able to come out and play 3 tunes. And then, after like maybe a week of the tour, he said, why don't you just stay out and, stay out for the whole show. Don't just come out for the 3 tunes. So yeah, I got to tour, do most of the tour. Vince came back for I think the last 2 or 3 weeks of the tour, but I got to play the whole tour. Plus, we broke off at one point and did a couple of gigs just with Michael and his band on like a week of touring with that. Plus, I got to play on the Motown 2 record. We had day off, and Mike's manager called me and said, "Hey, do you mind coming in?" Do I mind? Do you mind coming in and playing the intro to What's Going On? Because it's all Motown tunes, and it's got the sax thing in the beginning, and I could, I could play in my sleep. I played it so many times, and I was like, yeah. So I go into the session. We had a day off. It was on a day off. We were in New Jersey. We had it set. So the session was in New York, and I go in, and Mike's sitting in the control room, and he's like, "Oh man, thank you so much for." I was like, "Come, are you serious? Do you know what this means to me?" It was a great opportunity. It was unbelievable. It was highlight of my otherwise mediocre musical career, I would say.
And thankfully, you didn't get fired from that gig.
That's one of the ones I didn't get fired from, yes.
So we love you in Sax School for all of your teaching. You're so great at breaking things down, and particularly concepts like approaching rhythm and funk and stylistic things in Sax School. It's a big part of how you're helping our members. How did all of the teaching thing evolve for you?
Well, this is how it evolved for me, by you asking me to do this. Because, I had taught some prior to this, some private, students and stuff like that. I never, taught at, a music store or anything like that. I'd have, occasionally, kids' parents would force them to, take lessons, and they would come to my house and stuff like that. But this teaching at Sax School has been a whole other experience for me. And I enjoy it so much because, first of all, teaching adults way better than teaching kids for me, because kids, their brains are wet, they're still not fully formed humans, and a lot of them are there because their parents think it'd be a good idea for them to play an instrument, whereas everybody at Sax School wants to be there, and they want to learn, and they're hungry for it. They want to learn so badly. So that there's that aspect of it, that everybody's grateful. And plus, when you can, when the light goes on and you explain a concept to them, it's so gratifying for me that I'm able to do it. Because, when you teach a child or, a young adult or whatever, it takes them a while to process some of that stuff. And they might not understand it until 10 years down the line. They go, "Hey, that's what that guy was talking about when I, But with adults, they grasp the concepts so much quicker. So it's instant gratification for me, and the fact that it really makes me have to think about things that I don't ever think about doing. Things that, producing a sound or whatever it is, I have to go back and try to figure out how do I explain to somebody what I'm doing? Because, you know, I do kind of consider myself self-taught, even though I studied with this guy and this guy, I do consider myself taught. And so maybe I didn't learn things quite the right way or whatever. So I have to come up with a way to explain it to, thank God, an adult. And that gets the point across.
Well, I think, to be honest with you, Fred, I think everybody who's passionate about teaching has that same experience, that it makes you a better player by being a good teacher, because you need to go exactly what you're saying. You need to have a clear way. You need to codify what you're doing to yourself so that you can then explain it to somebody else. And that just is only going to make you understand what you're doing and talking about more deeply. You're going to understand it better. So yeah, it's brilliant. Well, look, you know what you're doing is great in Sax School, and we love all the things that you do, and I know you make a big impression on our students, and that I'm so glad that you enjoy doing it, because I've got so many more things that I want you to teach our people inside Sax School. So don't worry, you'll be busy for a while.
Right. I just want to say one thing: do as I say, not as I do. That's the big takeaway from this little session right here. Don't do what I did.
So yeah, I mean, well, that's good to hear you say that, actually. So,
because now I know how to do it. I know what needs to be done. That doesn't mean that I'm always doing it, but I do know what needs to be done now. I know how to get some things across, and I've got a lot of bad habits that I'm still trying to break, but I do know that they're bad habits.
I think the other big takeaway from hearing your story, Fred, is that the underlying thread all the way through is that you were always going out and finding new playing opportunities. You were learning, you were growing, and you're developing as a player. And everyone's journey is a little bit different. Like we mentioned Andy Snitzer before, and I love the sessions he's done for Sax School where he talked about, it seemed as if he was just like came out the womb and he could play saxophone like that. I'm sure he did a million hours of practice, but he got some wonderful breaks when he was still in high school, and touring with Bob James when he was I didn't even know what I was
college,
doing. Yeah, exactly. So everyone's journey is different, but the important thing is that everyone's the journey is with steps moving forward. So like hearing your story is different to my story, it's different to Joel's story or all the other guys that teach at Sax School, but the common thread is that we're all moving forward and growing and taking opportunities as we're going through. And I think that's a brilliant takeaway for anybody listening to this who's maybe wondering how they're going to craft some sort of future career, all that sort of stuff in their playing.
Yeah, I think the operative thing here is to say yes. That should be your first impulse. I took every gig, when I was growing up, and like I said, I've been playing since I was 10. And my dad was a musician, so I would go out and play gigs with him, back when I was like 14 or 15, for no money. And it was free, it was just an opportunity for him to have a free saxophone player. But I learned that you gotta say yes to every possibility, because you never know where that opportunity is going to lead. If I didn't do some of the things I did, I wouldn't have met some of the guys that I met, and I wouldn't have gotten, any of the gigs that I got. It's all about that network, and that you got to say yes.
Yeah,
that's the key.
Love it. Great takeaway. Hey, thanks so much for telling us all about that stuff, Fred. And if you're listening to this and you're not a member of Sax School, well, you've got to come and check out what we're doing. You get a chance to see all of the lessons that Fred's done for us, plus also get access to literally thousands of other lessons and all the structured courses that we've got, plus the help from all of our tutors. So we're doing a 14-day free trial at the moment, which you can find over at saxschoolonline.com. Come along and see what we're doing. We'd love to help you out with your playing. And also, if you're enjoying the podcast, this is a new thing that we're doing this year. I'd love it if you could maybe subscribe to the podcast and maybe even tell a friend about it too, so we can help to spread the message. Thanks a bunch though, Fred, and we need to have more conversations like this.
Yeah, I need therapy. That's what I need.
Well, thanks for talking to me, Fred. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll catch you next time.